Hello. Today on Health Spark, I'm so thrilled to have my close friend, Amy Lynn, with me here today. She's going to share with you her story with autoimmune disease and the lessons that she has learned along the way. Amy Lynn is a full time educator who also works online teaching future educators. And on top of that, she competes in triathlons and Ironman around the world, all while raising two amazing boys. And she does this while living with an autoimmune condition. So please help me in welcoming my friend, Amy Lynn, to our show today. Amy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jody.
So, Amy, let's start with your autoimmune story. When I first started this channel, I shared with listeners my journey and my diagnosis with Crohn's. And I think it's so important for us to share that because I think, regardless of the condition that you have, I feel that anyone living with autoimmune disease can relate to at least parts of the story. And I think it's so important for everyone to know that they are not alone, to hear other people who have had similar struggles or challenges, and to hear ways that they have coped and successfully created a life with health. Because I think that while we all may have different strategies or techniques for living with our disease and for thriving, I think when we share those strategies with others, we may have the key to help someone else unlock their best, healthiest life. So we'd love to hear from you the story of your diagnosis with Crohn's disease.
Thank you so much, Jody. And I completely agree with you that the journey through an autoimmune disorder is unique to ourselves, but it's also really important that we share it as much as we possibly can. We need everybody to understand that if you feel in your gut, or if you feel that there's something wrong, to really explore that. Mine started when I was really young. I grew up in a very small town that didn't have a lot of people with autoimmune disorders. Nobody talked about their health. It was just something that wasn't shared. And I remember as a child, I always felt sick. I always had a stomach ache. I always felt gross after I ate. And I basically grew up thinking that that was just how life was. We weren't taught to complain. We weren't taught to really share about those things. And when I would bring it up, it was just sort of fluffed off, right? Oh, you're just complaining, or oh, it just must be something you ate. And that was the end of it. So I grew up thinking that that was how I was supposed to feel. I was supposed to feel gross all the time. My stomach was supposed to hurt all the time. And everyone else probably just feels the same. So I painfully went through life being terrified of eating. And I was just diagnosed from everybody with an eating disorder. Everyone said, "Oh, she's just trying to be thin," or "Oh, she's just, a typical girl," which was horrifying because none of that was true. I just was truly afraid to eat. I knew that when I ate, I felt sick, or when I ate, I got sick. And it wasn't well received from people. And the doctors I went to, they didn't do anything exploratory. They really just said, "Nope, she has an eating disorder. You need to watch her. You need to monitor." And then I became really aware of all of that. And I became self-conscious of that. And that became a huge issue because I started having a food aversion. I was genuinely afraid of eating, and I didn't want to eat, and I didn't like food. So it wasn't until I was a lot older, actually about 7 years ago, that finally it came to me that I can't live like this. And I started talking to this new doctor that I had, and she really listened. And she said, "No, what you're feeling and what you're going through, and that pain and that agony, it's not normal. It's not okay." So we started tracking food. We started figuring out what helps, what doesn't help. And the only thing I could figure out on my own was that fitness helped. If I stayed fit, if I stayed active, the pain wasn't as bad. And so she started me on with a gastrologist who was incredible. I met with her, and it wasn't shoved to the side. It wasn't just ignored. All of a sudden I had somebody in my corner, but I had to fight for that. it sounds like it was this kind of quick journey, but it wasn't. It was 30 odd years that I lived with this, that I kept saying, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And I've got to know why. And I have to figure it out. And everybody just kept saying, oh, you're fine. Oh, you're fine. It's just a stomach ache. Um, they would give me some pills and then that would be it. And I knew that wasn't it. It wasn't the answer that I needed. So this beautiful, wonderful gastrologist helped me put me on scopes and did all these different tests for me. And unfortunately, I guess when they were doing one of the scopes, they found cancer. So they found cancer around my appendix. And that shut the autoimmune disorder journey down very quickly. They stopped worrying about that. We quickly went and dealt with the cancer. And they cut out a lot of my intestines. So they cut out most of my colon, they cut out the cecum, they cut out most of my large intestine. And so after we dealt with that and everything was sort of on track, we went back to the Crohn's route and colitis route. And unfortunately, the amount that they cut out a lot of the markers for it. So that delayed me another few years. And as painful as it was, I knew at least I had my gastrologist on my side. She kept saying, we're going to find something. We have to diagnose this. We have to get to the bottom of this, because she knew all of my tests were coming back saying that there's a problem. And I didn't want to go the big medication route. I didn't want to live on pills and injections. I didn't want to do that. So she worked really hard with me. And finally, after 2 more years of living with this, she was able to diagnose me with Crohn's disease. And luckily, she is a very big advocate for healthy living, healthy lifestyle. So we looked at my diet. We figured out what was triggering it. I can't eat gluten. I have celiac. So that was a great thing that we could figure out. Okay, we know I can't have that. And we went through it patiently. And that's the key that I found, is you have to be patient, and you have to know that you're going to take a few steps forward and a whole lot of steps backwards. And you have to be patient with yourself through it, and sort of trust the process. So we figured out that the more active I am, the healthier I am, the healthier my gut is, and the healthier I eat. And I watch my sugar intakes. I watch any dairy that I'm putting into my body. I really pay attention to those simple things. Then I can live this beautiful life without having to have pills, without having to have injections, as much as possible. And I can have this great relationship back with food that I've always wanted. And that was another part of the journey that I wanted to have. I knew I loved food, but I was so afraid of it. And I needed to feel that back. So we're still on the journey with it. We're still going through it day by day, and certain things come up where I go, oh, you know what? I really have to watch that. But it's this learning process where I feel like I'm actually gaining control with it. That's been wonderful. One of the biggest things that I have is stress. I found that stress has been a major trigger for me. So I can be eating right, and I'm super fit and healthy and doing all these things. And when big life events happen, my body just shuts down, and that's really difficult to control. And then that brings into meditation, it brings into yoga, and it brings into mindfulness, and talking to wonderful people like yourself and going, help me come up with ways to manage my stress. And again, paying attention to it. A lot of people go, oh yeah, you're just stressed, and that's it. And people don't realize what it does to your body. So we all feel it different, and we all go through our autoimmune disorders differently, but paying attention to all of the different triggers is something that everybody needs to figure out and really focus on.
Mhm. Amazing. And I think you hit on so many key points. I think a big piece for all people with autoimmune disease is learning to advocate for yourself. And I know that can be scary, because I think so many people have gone through what you've gone through, in the sense that they are told it's either all in their head, or their symptoms are dismissed as something else without really taking it further. And so I love that you, through all of the doubt, and sometimes it's hard because when enough people are telling you, oh, it's just this or it's just that, it's very easy to believe them. And then you almost become an enemy to your own body. You learn to not listen to it and trust it. And I think that that's probably such an amazing lesson for everyone to learn to love your body and to be able to be in tune with what's happening in it. And, we may not be medical experts, but we can still trust our intuition. And if someone says something and it doesn't feel right, then we need to advocate and just keep searching for an answer. And like in your case, that might take a really long time, but it's amazing that you carried on with that. And the other piece that I love that you shared was that it is a journey. It's a journey from our day of our symptoms starting, even before our diagnosis, through till the end of our life. It really is a journey. And so knowing that and not expecting there to be a finish line, I think is an important part of the mental health piece, which you also touched on, which I think is so important. And it's funny because I do feel that autoimmune diseases cause stress. They cause stress to our body, but they also cause mental stress. And so that can be a vicious circle because we know stress certainly impacts our immune system and inflammation in our body. And so they can kind of play off each other in a negative way. And I think sometimes people underestimate the importance of mental health and wellness. And I think if there's been anything positive through our COVID years, is that I think we have really understood that our mental health really is important and that it can play a key role in our health. So, thank you for sharing all those amazing, important points with us. So, you've already shared with us lots of great things that you do and things that you avoid, certain foods and things to help you live an amazingly healthy life with your autoimmune condition. Are there any other things that you do specifically or don't do to support your wellness with an autoimmune disease that maybe you weren't doing previous to your diagnosis?
I think most of it is just being really, really mindful. I think before I kind of went through life like we all do, just doing our thing, not really paying that much attention to it. But now I am really, really mindful. I'm very careful to make sure if I haven't ran in, ran today, I will make sure I will put it as a priority. And I think that's something that we don't do enough is, especially as moms, we don't put ourselves as a priority. And what happened was a few years ago when my boys were really little was I was in the hospital a lot, and I was in the hospital for a few weeks at a time, and it was a couple times a year, and it was awful. There was a couple times where we didn't think that I was going to make it because I was so sick and I was undiagnosed, so they couldn't do anything to help me, and they didn't know what was going on. So it was through those times that I had to really buckle down and say what weight makes me feel okay and what doesn't, and what do I need to cut out, because it's way too important that I am here and I am functioning and I am healthy and I am present for these boys. And that became a huge part of what I needed to do. And at the beginning, it was hard. It was guilt. You felt guilty for spending the time going to yoga or going for a run or spending any large amounts of time really focusing on your own mental health and your physical health. But when you can get through all of a sudden all these years where you're not going to the hospital, where you're being able to go and play and do all the things with your children, you sit back and you go, no, you know what, this is what my body needs. It's different from what somebody else's body might need, but my body needs to be taken care of in this way, and it has to have the attention it has on it. So I'm really lucky right now where I am in life. I have an extremely big, wonderful support system for mental health, for my physical health. So I think right now where I am in my journey, I'm probably at the best spot that I've been in all of my 41 years on this planet. So hopefully continuing on with this, keeping track, making sure I'm diligent with it and not slacking off, because you can't, unfortunately. You pay the price. So making yourself a priority really helps in that way. And I'm hoping that's just a good trajectory up.
I love that. And I agree with you. We have the mom guilt almost on either side. So if we are sick and unable to spend the time with our kids, we have mom guilt. If we take time to take care of ourselves, to make ourselves a priority, we have mom guilt. And so I like to say, if you're going to have the guilt anyway, you might as well have it for a good reason and not for a bad. And I know personally for myself, when my kids saw me sick and saw me end up in the hospital, it was stressful for them. Whereas if I'm taking time away from them to go exercise or to do something like meditate or practice gratitude for myself, while they may want my attention, they're not stressed out by the lack of my presence. So I would rather take the time in a positive way. And I look at it like we're showing our kids that it's important for them to take care of themselves too. And I think that that's such a great lesson. If we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't be there for our kids. So while it feels selfish, it's really not. It's really a selfless act for them to show up the best that we can. So I love that. So while your diagnosis was only a few
So
years
while you're
ago,
diagnosed,
you've been living with this for most of your life. And I'm curious, I know for myself personally, I've learned many things along the way because some of it is just trial and error, and our bodies are all different. However, if you could speak to the younger version of you back in the day before you had a diagnosis, when you had lost that connection with food and it had become an unhealthy and unhappy relationship, is there any advice that you would have given to yourself back then from where you're sitting now that you think would have been so beneficial and helpful to you as you were struggling in that early part of your journey?
without a doubt, I would say fight more, fight harder, research more. I spent a lot of time going, oh, okay, when someone would say it's just a stomach ache. Everybody gets them, or just when people would just fluff it off as it was nothing. And I was embarrassed about some of my symptoms. I was embarrassed, to have all of these things happen to me, which happens with Crohn's disease or a lot of autoimmune disorders. It's not fun to talk about. It's hard as a teenager. It's hard as a 20-year-old to talk about sometimes. And when you're trying to talk about them, trying to share, trying to get answers, and you're not met with that open arms of communication, people aren't wanting to come and help you, it is really tricky. And what I say to that is find a new group of people, find a new set of doctors, find new support systems, but get yourself the help that you need. And if you don't like what the doctor has to say, no problem. Get another opinion. Find somebody that is willing to help you and willing to work with you. Because if you know deep down that something is not right, it's not. It's your body, and you put it beautifully. We are not medical professionals, but we sure are in tune with our bodies. And when you can track it and when you can look at it and when you can sit with yourself and say, I'm not okay, something is wrong. I don't know what, but something is wrong. Then you need to just keep pushing and you just don't let up until you have someone that's going to listen to you and a support system that's willing to stand with you.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I agree, even when it comes to working with specialists that specialize in your autoimmune condition, I went through many before I found one that was a great match with me in the sense that our beliefs aligned in a way that I was happy with. And I remember at one point when I finally became strong enough to realize that I knew me and that it was okay to advocate for myself, and that not every doctor knows everything. They all have different areas of knowledge and interest, even if they all specialize in the same area. Not everyone is made the same. And so I finally said to one doctor, I know you're a specialist in Crohn's. However, I'm a specialist in me. I've lived in this body for X amount of years, and I am not okay with going down the path that you are telling me I need to go down. I think another important thing, and I'm sure that you've learned this too, is that the doctors are not the boss. And I believed that for many years. I grew up, my family, we respected medical professionals, and I still do have the utmost respect for them and the hours and the dedication they have to helping people. Yet they are not the boss. It is your body. And in fact, you are going to this doctor to consult with them. So they are your consultants. They are supporting you with their knowledge and giving you their best ideas of what they think would be the best route of care for you. But that doesn't mean it's the only route of care and the only solution. And so if you don't like the options that your doctor is giving you, get another opinion. There are as many opinions as there are doctors. And you may get five or six, and they all say the same thing that you maybe don't like. Then maybe it's time to reevaluate. Well, why do so many of them have the same opinion and think that this is best for me? And that's when you can, of course, dive into research and other things. But ultimately, listening to your body, I think I agree with you, is such an important message to give to people who are starting out. And it's really hard when you start out because many people were not really trained to be in tune with our bodies. And it's only when things start to go wrong that we start to take a more active approach in being in tune with and listening to what's happening in our bodies. If it's working fine, then we're not really paying much attention to it. And so it's easy, I think, at the beginning of things going wrong to not be confident in what you're feeling or experiencing and to not be confident in the truth of that. You, especially if someone's telling you otherwise, it's easy to think, well, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong, but you're the one in the body. So
One of the things that I was told time and time again was the exercise. Not too much, and oh, you're training too hard, and maybe that's what the problem was. And that was from family, friends, everybody, doctors that said, oh, you're doing too much, you're training too hard. And my sport is really demanding physically, but that was the best thing I could have done for my mental health. And people didn't realize that. So maybe I was sick, maybe I had a flare up, something was going wrong in my system, and I was still going for a run or going for a ride, going for a swim, something to help my body. And sometimes people don't realize that if that's not something that's important to them or something that they're used to, that's how I dealt with stress, was going for that run, doing those hard things, keeping my mind active and my body active. So it was interesting finding that doctor that was the right fit, that said, good for you, this is what's working, this is what we need to do, and if this is helping your mental health as well as your physical, do it. And it really is true. You have to keep pushing and finding and figuring out which doctor is the best fit for you.
mhm, amazing. And I think you touched on an important part, that dealing with the mental health piece is as important as the physical piece, because if you are stopping exercise, which is helping with stress or anxiety, then that in itself can cause more inflammation in your body. So it is a delicate balancing act for sure, but both pieces are so important. So, Amy shared with me recently that her son has been recently diagnosed with an IBD. So, I was hoping, Amy, that you could share with us a little on how that is as a mom dealing with a child who is now going through similar yet different struggles as you did when you were younger.
Thanks, Jody. And it's so much harder dealing with a child that he has both Crohn's and colitis, and it's very severe. He's had a terrible year. We were very lucky. We finally, again, we had to search through those doctors that pushed him to the side, the doctors that said, oh, he's fine. We actually had a doctor flat out tell us, no, he's fine, looked us right in the eye. And then we said, this isn't okay. So we found a new doctor, and that doctor did scopes. The doctor did all of the tests, and he was put on immediate bed rest because his iron was so low. It was, we were so lucky that that doctor was as great as she was, and still continue is. So Jacob has a longer route. It's a harder route than I definitely have. And it's been amazing to watch him now, because he was so sick. He was so unbelievably sick in the fall. And now he is doing great. He is, playing hockey, playing football, playing rugby, doing all of the things that he wants to do. He's a very active kid. The great thing about Jacob is that he has learned to trust doctors again. He has learned to be happy about life. And he said to me during his last infusion, he said, it's all worth it. And this is a kid that gets a lot of needles and a lot of tests every single month. We are always at a clinic or a hospital somewhere doing something. And he said, it's all worth it, Mom. He said, for how I feel now from how I felt before, he goes, I do it all. He goes, I'll do whatever it takes to feel this way. So we're really lucky. And it's hard because I know his journey is going to get harder, and it's his own journey, it's his own path, but he is figuring out what works for him. And to have a 13-year-old that is more in tune with his body than most people are at my age is amazing to see. He knows what he can do, what he can't do. He knows that he has to move his body. He knows keeping a positive attitude is a key for him, because he's a lot like me, where it's stress is what gives him those awful flare ups. So he works on it. He works on changing his mindset of from a negative mindset to a positive, to understanding, self-fulfilling prophecies. If I think of the positives, if I think things are going to happen, at least it might not work out that way, but at least I'm on the right path with it. So it's been a challenging road, and it will continue to be challenging. But the fact that I have Crohn's and my partner has colitis, and Jacob has Crohn's and colitis, at least we know that we can support him on this journey. We know that we can help him. We know the signs to look for. We talk very openly about all of the symptoms, all those uncomfortable things that come with it. It's not uncomfortable in our family. It is just regular dinner conversation, pretty much, of just how you're feeling, advocate for yourself. And even at school, going through the motions of making sure that those teachers and those schools, they know that if he has to go to the bathroom, there is no wait time. He has to go and being comfortable and confident enough as a parent to stand up and say, no, this is what my child needs. And this is what he deserves. And this is what he's going to have in order for him to be successful and him to feel comfortable in his own space. So he's learning a lot of new things as he goes. But I think having parents now or a support system that advocates along with him and encourages him to say, this works, this doesn't work, and why? Why am I taking these pills? Why am I getting this scope and this test? He's very aware now about why he's doing and what he's doing. And he's building his own sort of philosophy around his body and how he's going to deal with this for his life.
Amazing. And Jacob sounds like an amazing kid. I mean, being 13 and going into becoming a teenager is not an easy time for any child, or adolescent, I should say. I don't think he'd want me to call him a child anymore. But then when you add a challenge like an autoimmune disease, certainly that can complicate things. And I have no doubt that he is so grateful and certainly so fortunate to have the support system he has, to have you and your partner, to have an amazing family who isn't going to dismiss this, not out of meanness or malice, but simply out of unknowing, as my family did. We didn't even know what Crohn's was when I was diagnosed. So, of course, no one would have suspected that. But because he has you and all your years of experience, no doubt that played a huge role in allowing him to be diagnosed so much quicker and therefore not getting so much worse, even though he was so sick. I would hate to imagine how bad it would have gotten had he not had that support system. And I think it's amazing that he is learning through this journey with you and on his own how to advocate. As we said earlier, that was the one thing we wished we had learned earlier. And it's such an important key. So he's already learning how to listen to his body, how to improve his mental health and keep himself in a more healthy state, and how to advocate for himself. And I think that's so important. And while I was on the opposite end of believing everything every doctor told me and thinking they were the boss, I can understand for him how he lost trust in doctors after going through and getting so sick and being told that it wasn't anything. So I love that he's now coming back into balance to realize that every doctor is different and there are amazing doctors out there that can help him, which I think, given that this is a lifelong journey, is such an important key to have a support system as big and wide as we can, which will include medical professionals, our family, our friends, and even the school system. So being able to be open and talk about it, I think, is so huge, because removing that stigma, and we all know that teenagers, the biggest thing they want is to belong and to not stand out. And so an autoimmune disease can cause a challenge there, but I think the more we talk about it in general, the less taboo it becomes. And then kids can still feel confident and not less than when living with an autoimmune condition. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important, the word needs to get out so that everyone can have an amazing journey and find their health the way that Jacob is doing now.
I completely agree. And thank you so much, Jody, for all of this. It's wonderful that you're having this platform to share all of this information and to get people talking and get comfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Have the conversations, figure out what we need.
Thank you again, Amy, for coming on HealthSpark and sharing not only your 30+ year journey with an autoimmune condition, but also sharing your son Jacob's beginning journey with an autoimmune condition with us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, stay healthy.